I'm Dave Gray. I'm an illustrator and I do children's books and sometimes comics, sometimes prints, do printmaking and screen printing. So anything kind of visual really. And sometimes I'm involved in animation as well. I think the work that I'm most proud of is a book that I did called Benny's Hat, which it's kind of a really sad story. It's about a little girl losing her brother. He dies, which is obviously a really sad story, but it's a really important story. And we worked with bereavement counselling services and hospices, doing kind of workshops to help develop the story. And it's been used all around the world to help children who are going through bereavement themselves of a sibling. And there aren't really any books around for that kind of thing, so it just goes through the emotions of the character and helps people to talk about their situation. I think I started considering myself a professional. It took me a while. I think a lot of people suffer from imposter syndrome and they feel like they're not quite there yet. But I think that when you realise people are paying you for your work and they really like your work and they're seeking you out, they want you to work on projects with them, and I've got probably thousands of creative projects under my belt now, but at times I still feel a bit kind of butterflies in my stomach about the next project. But I think after a few years of being in the industry, kind of learning the ropes, I think that's when I started to feel like, I kind of got a picture of what's going on and what I want to achieve, and a steady stream of work. And I think that's it's quite hard to do that within the creative industry sometimes. So a lot of people have to have a day job to kind of do their hobby or do their illustration work. Whereas I've always been consistently employed. So I guess looking back, I think it's probably a few years into my career that I started to feel like a professional. I think when you're an illustrator, you're constantly assessing your work, and you constantly see the problems in the work, and you constantly see the things you're not good at, like not very good at drawing hands, or not very good at drawing expressions, whatever that is. There's so many things you want to level up, and you look around and you just see loads of work that people do that is just amazing, and it can be really disheartening, I think. And you can look around and think, I'm a total imposter. I just can't draw like that. But I think it's important to try and get over that. And as well, in the creative fields, if you go through a university setting, you'll go through critique groups and things like that, and people will, look at your work and kind of tell you what's wrong with it. And I remember once sticking up some life drawings on the wall, and someone was kind of overhearing a friend taking the rip out of them. He didn't realise they were mine, but we had a good laugh about it. But I've never been a super strong drawer. I think I'm more on the conceptual side of things, and more on the kind of imagination. It's taken a long time for my drawing skills to catch up with my imagination, I guess. And so I think it's normal to feel like an imposter sometimes, but then sometimes people react really well to your work, and they might find somebody else's work just leaves them cold. So it's kind of your own personality in the work that comes through, and it doesn't matter necessarily if technically that's as good as that. It's more about connecting with people on an emotional level. I think if I was to be able to give my younger self some advice, I would probably say, it's not all about the money. It's like trying to carve a path through a creative career where you get to work on projects that you're really proud of and that you can put your personality into, is really important. And I think at times I've had to obviously earn money to pay the bills, so I've done a lot of commercial work, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think if I could say anything, it's like have a bit more confidence in yourself and your own sort of vision, your own sort of artistic vision, and follow where that leads. I mean, a lot of projects have an artist and writer. Some projects obviously are, author, illustrator, one person. It's an interesting one because as an illustrator, I often find that I'm a little bit sort of sidelined in terms of the project. I think that's probably a thing that is more prevalent in children's books than in comics, perhaps. I think, a lot of the artists in comics have a really high status, but in children's books, it's really weird. A lot of the times people are much more focused on the writer, even though it's probably the illustrations that are going to attract someone in a shop. So, I mean, it's both, isn't it? But I think with an illustrator, it can take, say, 6 months to illustrate a children's book, whereas a writer is probably going to work on the manuscript for a long time, but feasibly they sometimes could write a children's book in like half an hour. It's possible. It's probably not likely. But it's a bit of both, but I'm going to say illustrator. It's more important. I shouldn't have said that. I think out of Marvel and DC, I think I've always loved Batman, so I think I'm going to have to go with DC. It's like one of those, if I had to choose one superhero, even if he's not technically a superhero or whatever, I'd probably go with Batman. I don't know what that says about me, but I think my favourite story at the moment, probably because I've read it recently, is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, which is a very, really, really classic, well-written book that is sort of incredibly creepy. It almost feels like a haunted house book, but it isn't a haunted house book. And I really like that kind of psychological kind of play that she's put in that book. The characters really come to life, and I think that's what I'm kind of most into at the moment. It's kind of getting inside a character's head. So my creative process is a lot of, when I'm working on my own projects, a lot of it just comes from ideas and imagination. I do lots of doodling. My sketchbook's a wreck, but it's just kind of lots of doodles, ideas, and that sparks other ideas. And so I'll start like that, and then I'll start very sketchy, very tiny. I draw really small, and usually I'll then, then I'll kind of do thumbnails of a project. If it's like a book, I'll do every page, but really small, so I can change it and swap things around, and then it'll be moving on to actually creating characters and drawing the actual artwork. I think, that's probably my creative process, but I really like using certain tools on my computer that I've got a Wacom that I draw on, and I really like Animate CC, or what was formerly known as Flash, but because you can draw in vectors, you can blow them up to any size, and I need an undo button, really. I do work on paper sometimes for sketchy sort of stuff and watercolour sort of stuff, but I just like having an undo, and I'll do endless undos until it's just right. It's weird, but I think a lot of comic artists really have characters that they want to kind of draw. I don't particularly have that. I think I'm more excited about my own ideas, or like characters that I have conceived of or come up with. I've done a lot of projects where I've illustrated and somebody else has written it, but often it doesn't feel like it's me in a way. It's like I'm drawing somebody else's work, their thoughts, their ideas, their characters, rather than my own. And I think that for me it's more about creating something, and so I think I probably got a slightly different mindset than say the average comic artist who might really want to draw Batman or really want to draw Spider-Man. That's not really my art style anyway, but I think my own work is kind of more exciting to me in a way.